January 17, 2019, meeting of the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will come to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain? Here. Mr. Delapietro?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
And Mr. Treebwasser.
Here. Mr. Secretary, will you make a note, please, that Mr. Harris is detained at work and Mr. Tamburillo is unable to attend due to medical reasons.
So noted.
Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meetings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. January 10th, 2018, January 4th, 2019. It was emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Avenel Middle School and the Board of Education Administration Building.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Delapietro, the closed session statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board must go into closed session in order to discuss subjects exempted from the public portion of our meeting. The discussions to be held in closed sessions will be regarding personnel matters. In addition, the board will discuss a student residency matter. Any information regarding the closed session discussion will be released to the public when the reasons for discussing these matters in closed session no longer exist.
I have a motion by Mr. Delapietro. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Molnar. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. We'll return after closed session.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Colonia High School Band is a premier musical ensemble comprised of students in grades 9 through 12. The jazz band performs at a wide variety of school and community events, and students must audition in order to be selected for this group. Although the ensemble is modeled after a 1940s swing-era big band, the students also perform in a wide variety of other styles, such as blues, funk, and rock and roll. The students focus heavily on the development of self-confidence, self-expression, and improvisational skills. Tonight's selections include In a Mellow Tone by Duke Ellington and Buffalo Wings by Mike Carubia. They will finish with the Star-Spangled Banner. They are led by Mr. Berdoni and Mr. Barbado.
Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to reconvene?
So motion.
Motion by Mr. Molnar, second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson, all in favor?
Aye.
Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Bourdain? Here. Mr. Delapietro?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Molnar?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
Mr. Triebwasser?
Here. Will someone make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meetings?
So motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris, second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Delapietro. Any additions or corrections? I have a motion by Mr. Harris, second by Mr. Delapietro. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record the notice of bids received by the board.
Thank you, Mr. President. On January 11th, 2019, PD 19-16, food service and kitchen equipment at Colonia High School.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, please state for the record any communications or reports received by the board.
Mr. President, there were none at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Dr. Zaga, please state for the record the superintendent's report for the month of December 2018.
Mr. President, I have the following reports to present to the board: the student registers and the security and fire drill reports, suspension reports for elementary and secondary schools, bomb threat reports, and the reports of the attendance officer.
Thank you, Dr. Zaga. Dr. Zaga, will you please introduce our student representative, Byron Barros?
Yes, sir. Brian Barros is Colonia High School student. He has been accepted into Rutgers University and is waiting a reply from NYU, which is his first choice. He plans to study political science, law, English, and writing. Human rights attorney is Brian's aspiration after college. He's accumulated 180 hours of community service. Among his programs he participates in: Domestic Violence Awareness Group, Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide, the Girl Up Club, Interact, the Declaration, Spring Track, and AVID. He's a member of the National Honor Society, the Science National Honor Society, the National Honor Society Secretary, the Student-Led Action Committee, and the Student Council and Student Government. He was recognized for the Superintendent Scholar Award in grade 9. He speaks 3 languages, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. And he is also a peer tutor for English as well as the SAT. Brian?
Nice to meet you all. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Zega, President Treebwasser, and board members, Central Administration, for having me tonight. And now for the information about our schools. Claremont School number 20. We have implemented the Student of the Month for character education. Students will receive a Cougar compliment if they are caught being good. Our 5th grade students partnered up with our kindergarten students to enjoy a fun game of book bingo. Our media specialist hosted a grade 5 family book club. 4th grade students participated in family science. 3rd grade students participated in family math. And 2nd grade students participated in family writing. Our families donated about 1,100 pounds of food to our St. James Food Pantry, and our annual Jump for Heart fundraiser is in full swing. At Lindcrest School number 22, our Veterans Day program was held on November 2nd, where we welcomed 3 veterans. Our 4th grade essay winner, Shlok Marwadi, read his essay to the assembly. Open house was held on November 13th as part of the American Education Week. Chartwell's provided a seasonal tasting for our students on November 15th. Our Tiger Buddies program returned on November 21st. Steered Straight delivered assemblies on positive character to our students on November 26th. An hour of code was observed during the week of December 3rd. Our PTO sponsored a breakfast for all our school's bus drivers on December 18th to thank them for their efforts in keeping our students safe. Our winter concert was held on December 19th, and over 160 students participated in our monthly fall reading program. At Avenel Middle School, classes are utilizing Apple Classroom and a variety of educational apps. 6th and 7th grade students are using Chromebooks. Many of our classrooms are now paperless. Our updated media center now includes new iMac computers, a video production area with a full-size green screen, and an 82-inch 4K presentation display. Last month, we celebrated Computer Science Week in an hour of code. Our family literacy night was a great success. Our band and chorus members performed to a large crowd at the AMS Winter Concert. Our boys and girls basketball teams had outstanding seasons. The Heroes and Cool Kids from Colonia High School visited AMS. Our Woodbridge High School Guidance Department and ROTC visited AMS. Our building will be participating in the upcoming Township Food Drive, and our environmental club is leading our building-wide effort to the Trex recycling program. At Colonia High School, LeGrand Haley Holiday Jubilee basketball for Team LeGrand was a success over the holiday break. Congratulations to Miss Kathleen Green for receiving the Governor's Educator Award and Miss Jacqueline Giordano for being selected as the Educational Services Professional. The writings of 60 students have been accepted to be published by young writers through their Stranger Sagas writing contest. Julia Irizarry is the first student in 20 years who auditioned and was accepted into Central Jersey Music Educators Association Region 2 Symphonic Band. The French Honor Society is currently preparing for April's Multicultural Fusion Night. They also participated in the Holiday Bazaar and are currently raising money for Doctors Without Borders. Halloween Movie Night was held wherein Halloween costumes were collected for underprivileged children. Senior Daniel DeRocha received Eagle Scout recognition. Smart Lunch Trial is still underway. A second movie night was held in December, wherein funds were donated to our Giving Tree. The Inman Avenue Walk participation and funds raised $500 for Pink Socks. The Thanksgiving Food Drive collected over 2,000 pounds of food. 239 coats were received for the Fall Sports Coat Drive. Approximately 102 books were collected for the Winter Sports Book Drive. SLAC will be sponsoring a Black History Month celebration on February 22nd at 6:00 p.m. The safety ambassadors will present their safety lessons to the 1st and 2nd grade students at School 24. Ms. Matola's class went to Chick-fil-A to learn about budgeting, how to appropriately order off of a menu, understand how to pay for an order, manners in a restaurant, and much more. And last but not least, seniors Sharmi Shaw and Gianna Fantel were recognized as one of the top 300 scholars in the 78th annual Regeneron Science Talent Search. Each student received a $2,000 scholarship, and our school received $2,000 per scholar, $4,000 total, towards STEM-related activities.
Thank you, Mr. Barros. Absolutely, you are one of the busiest people I have ever met. Amazing all the things you've accomplished so far in such a short period of time. Thank you very much. If you'd like
No
to stick
problem.
around and join us for the rest of the meeting, you are certainly welcome to join this riveting meeting for the rest of the evening.
I apologize, I cannot. I have to study for a test tomorrow.
You are a very smart young man. Thank you very much for...
Thank you.
I'd also like to recognize Ms. Murphy, the Vice Principal at Colonial High School, for being here to support her student. Thank you very much for taking time out of your evening. Superintendent's agenda, Dr. Zaga.
Mr. President, I have 24 items to present to the board.
Do I have a motion for the superintendent's agenda?
Motion?
I have a motion by Mr. Harris, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Velez. Any comments or questions from the board?
No.
Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Policy and Planning, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following 8 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Harris.
I'd like to note to the public and to the rest of my fellow school board members that the Policy and Planning Committee has drafted and will be publishing on the district's website a draft 2019-2020 student calendar. The posting is for the parents as well as students, members of the community, to take a look at that calendar and provide feedback to the Policy and Planning Committee and the Superintendent of Schools about that student calendar. It's always a very important document, if you will, one of the biggest next to the budget. So please take a look at that. The board will likely take that up for adoption at the February meeting. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar.
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Curriculum Committee, Mr. Harris.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The Curriculum Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, present the following, I apologize, 7 items, I believe it is, 7 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. Any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. President?
Ms. Anderson.
Yes, I have a question on item number 2 and 6. Can we get a brief description of the pilot programs for the public?
Sure. Dr. Zaga?
Mr. Bader?
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Anderson. Pilot number 2, which is upon your approval, will occur at Colonia High School, is a language arts class that will combine writing with film production. So students who will participate in screenplay writing and then follow that up with actually producing movies based on what they write. Number 6, advertising and promotions. Will be occurring upon your approval at Woodbridge High School. It really is taking marketing to a new level with reference to producing promotions related to not only legal, government, and also private industry. So I want to thank Ms. Bourdain actually for really getting involved, based on her background with the item number 6. In regards to promoting a class that actually takes marketing to a very relevant level with the students, and they're going to enjoy it.
Thank you, Mr. Bader. Ms. Bourdain, you had a question or something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to point out that item number 3 is the PACE Extended School Year Program. Will run Monday, July 1st and conclude Monday, August 5th. And I just wanted to make sure people noted that.
Thank you, Ms. Bourdain. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public?
All right, David Pinkowitz, Island. Just a question, since it was asked about the 2 pilot programs. It says no cost to the district. Is this being borne by whoever created the curriculum, or why is there no cost, I guess?
Go ahead, Mr. Vader.
Mr. Pinkwitz, actually, quite frequently when we run a pilot, a lot of the responsibility and actually the origin of the pilot comes from a really enthusiastic teacher with an awesome skill set. And in these cases, that also is true. So what will happen in a pilot, the teacher will use teacher-created material quite frequently through free and open resources and in coordination with the Google environment and online resources as well. So it will be a teacher-created curriculum initially with no cost for books.
Okay, and just let me ask you, so it seems like the no cost is referring to books and materials, the type of things you might have to buy, let's say a math book. What about teacher time? Is the teacher doing this do they like take a leave like from their normal class schedule? They have one less class, or do this on their own time? Like, how does that happen?
I would really have to look and speak to the administrators in those schools. At times, teachers do volunteer to give up a duty period to teach an additional course. That may be what is happening here. A lot of our teachers really would rather be in the classroom engaged with the kids versus on a duty. Or students may have been reallocated out of a class that they were previously enrolled in, and that would really be a net, not a net gain or not a net loss, but a reallocation of students. I'll have to look into it.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Wolferman, can you please make a note on item 2 and, was it 2 and 6?
Yes.
That there is no additional curricular costs, because we are paying the teacher still to be part of the district staff.
If I may, when I spoke with the teacher that is going to do number 6, it was in the beginning of the summer. And I said, I apologize to make you work over the summer. And he said, I'm already Googling what I want to research. And that was on his own time, his summer break. He spent his summer creating this class and he was excited to do it. That's all.
And just to clarify to the rest of the board, that items 2 and 6 on the curriculum agenda, you'll be voting on them, as I just stated to the business administrator, board secretary, that it will say that it was no additional curricular costs to the district.
So noted.
Everybody? Okay. Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar,
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Finance Insurance, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 11 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bourdain. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public?
David Pinkowitz, Island. Just wanted to ask a question. We regularly have on these agendas something similar to item 5, which is bookkeeping transfers from one account to another for various schools. Specifically in item 5, so I noted Colonia High School had a few different transfers. One set of transfers was from nursing supplies and academic awards to go for capital supplies. In the other case, it was money from phys ed supplies to go to athletic entry fees. I guess the one concern I have, when the board reviews this, do you know, for example, with academic awards, I can't imagine the academic award budget is bigger than the athletic award budget, which typically we know we have like 3 times a year where they're giving out athletic awards at each of the high schools. So to take what's a relatively small amount and then take more money away from it, I'm wondering, are all the academic awards that were meant to be given out going to be given out? Are they just taking away because no one cares? So I just have concerns when I see like there, you're taking away from academic awards, something that potentially benefits kids that aren't in athletics. On the other case, in the next one, taking phys ed supplies, which presumably are for the general student body, so every student at Colonia High School, and then giving those to athletic entry fees. It's not clear what entry fees, because it doesn't say, but presumably for a specific team or teams, which is a small subset of the student body. So does the board really review these, or is it just pretty much take, from the principals, whatever they say, and you'll just approve it unless it looks completely egregious?
Yes and no to both of those. We do question them. If the principal makes a statement and they feel, and they have substantiated the reason for doing it, they're the people that run the nuts and bolts of that school. So certainly they have the best understanding of their individual budget. But I will find out the detail on this, and we will make sure that we get back to you with what the detail was. But I assure you that I find it hard to believe that any of the principals would take money out of a line item like that unless it was necessary and unless they felt that they had already covered their obligation for that line item.
Okay, these are always difficult for the public because I can't see what they've spent outside of this line. You take away $150, did you spend $5,000? Did you spend $150? Was that the original budget? I don't know. Anyway, thanks.
Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Technology, Mr. Sedana.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Technology Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, present the following two items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Mr. Sedana. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Delapietro. Any comments or questions from the board? Comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Athletics and extracurricular agenda. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Athletics and Extracurricular Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, presents the following 11 recommendations. Let the record reflect on item number 1 should be corrected to read 2018 Fall Sports Season. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson with a correction. Mr. Secretary, noted.
So noted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Molnar. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro? Yes. Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez? Yes. Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Cafeteria agenda. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Cafeteria Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Business Administrator, Board Secretary, presented the following one item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Yes.
I have a second by Mr. Sedana. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Personnel agenda, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Personnel Committee, on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, presents the following. Tonight, I will be moving 24 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Molnar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Delapietro. Any comments or questions from the board?
Sir, Mr. President?
Yes, sir, Mr. Harris.
I took this right from the website. I figured it was personnel related. Effective February the 4th, 2019, ESS, formerly known as Source for Teachers, will be the substitute staffing provider for the Woodbridge Township School District. If you or anybody you know is interested in becoming a substitute teacher for Woodbridge Township, please advise them at ESS. Their phone number is 877-983-2885. 2244, or check out their website at ess.com/job seekers, plural. So that is our new substitute service. Again, check out the website to become a substitute teacher. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public?
David Pinkwitz, Island. Just wanted to comment that I'm happy to see Mr. Postorino being appointed, assuming the board votes affirmatively, to be principal of JFK. I did have one question. Assuming the board does vote in the affirmative, will Mr. Postorino, obviously he'll officially start on April 1st. Will the school just maintain an acting principal with Mrs. Wandrus, the vice principal, being in charge for the time being, or will there be a move to have an acting principal until that April 1st date that's separate from what's going on today? Or can that even be answered?
Mr. Pinkowitz, at this point, we're going to have Ms. Wandrus continue to run the ship as she's been doing an outstanding job. And then when Mr. Pastorino moves over, then he will take the reins. I'm sure he'll be in contact if he's approved tonight with Ms. Wandrus to make sure that he's working together in concert with her so that the school continues to maintain its outstanding performance.
All right. Thank you.
Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bourdain?
Yes.
Mr. Delapietro?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Molnar?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
And before I get to you, Mr. Treebos, I think Mr. Delapietro
Yeah,
has a
on,
comment.
on item number 9, I'll be abstaining on the name Linda Delapietro.
Thank you. And Mr. Treebwasser?
I will be abstaining on item 12 in the name of Linda Treebwasser, yes on all other items.
Thank you.
Mr. Bush, do you have any recommendations this evening?
Not at this time, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Is there any old business that should be brought to the attention of the board?
Next one.
Any new business that should be brought before the attention of the board?
No, why don't we go to Frank first?
No, go ahead, yeah,
No, you're vice president.
Mr. Delapietro, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to recognize our Director of Security, Brian Small. Last month, there was a robbery that occurred just over the town borderline in Edison that claimed the life of a Ford's resident. That occurred around like 5:30 in the morning. I live right down the street from that. There was helicopters flying over, put News 12 on, sort of breaking news. I called Mr. Small up just to advise him, and Brian was already on top of it. He also notified the school patrols, because we have 2 elementary schools and a middle school that's right down the street from where that incident had taken place. Like I said, Mr. Small was on top of it. When I called him, he already had a plan in place. So I just want to thank Mr. Small, for a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delapietro. Mr. Harris.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few items this evening. Bruno, could you zoom in on this? We're going to do a Greg Ficara special right here. This is Raising Happier Kids. This is a program being put on by the Township next week on Thursday the 24th. It's taking place at Island Middle School. It's a program being put on by the Health Department. It looks like a great program. I believe it's on the district website, Dr. Zega. I think we sent it out. So check this out. It starts at 7 p.m. and Island Middle School is located at 900 Woodruff Street in Island. Actually, technically, I think it's 900 Panther Way, but that's for another day. Nextly, the President's Council sent the board an email, and I thought I'd give them a shout out this evening. That is the umbrella parent-teacher organization here in the township, run by parents who are active in the PTOs. They're holding their annual winter meeting coming up February the 26th. It's typically a Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. at School 26. It's Robert Mercedes Elementary School, located at 300 Benjamin Avenue. This is an event, a PTO event that's open to all parents in the Woodbridge Township School District. It's a great opportunity to hear from the superintendent, school board members, the mayor, other special guests, different special presentations. Great event. Typically they feed you as well, so definitely come and check it out. And lastly, our full-day kindergarten registration recently began. It's a two-step process. First online with an online application, and then from there you schedule an in-person interview or completing the rest of your paperwork. So please do not show up essential registration first. Please go online first and fill out the necessary paperwork. This way you're prepared when you do go in person. Again, that started recently, and it is on a first-come, first-served basis, so make sure you get your 4 or 5-year-old registered for next year's full-day kindergarten program. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Just a brief update, as I've been doing for the last couple of board meetings, is regards to School 18. Land Associates has been doing some exploratory around the base of the building, has come up with some observations and things that we're going to be addressing. We will be able to have more detail on it once they present their scope of work to us, and then we will understand how to go out to bid for it and then know what the cost is. We will continue to update our standard operating procedures for environmental hazards. So far, the system has been working relatively well. We do find hiccups here and there, and as we find them, we address them and we correct them. These standards are for the entire district and not just for School 18. If anybody in the school or anybody in the community has questions about how we are doing this or would like to talk to myself, Dr. Zager, or any member of the board, please feel free to reach out to do it. And lastly, our security department, which also encompasses the attendance officers, we have been doing, or they have been doing, an outstanding job of finding people that are in our district unauthorized. We have gone to the extent where that if you are in this district and you don't belong here and you don't deserve or not entitled to an education, we will take you to court, we will prove that you owe us money for it, and then we will pursue it. So I'd like to thank our entire security team for doing an outstanding job, and that they are been very successful so far in bringing revenue back into the district for people that have been here unofficially or unwillingly or unlawfully, however you want to look at it. So with that being said,
Mr. President, can I make one additional new business announcement?
absolutely, Mr. Bader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trebwasser. I wanted to mention to the public, February 2nd, it's a Saturday before the Super Bowl. We have 2 events occurring at Woodbridge High School that are open to the public. The first event is Ed Camp Blitz, and both of these events are on our website. Ed Camp Blitz will occur from 8 a.m. till noon, and it is an education sharing session. So primarily our teachers in the district attend, some administrators. We also encourage parents and students and teachers. Maybe a parent lives in the district but teaches in another district. We would like to get ideas from outside of the district as well. So we're inviting all participants who would like to discuss issues in education to attend Ed Camp Blitz. And that same day in the afternoon, in the Woodbridge High School Ace Room, we'll be running a vintage video game tournament with the game Nintendo Tecmo Bowl, and the proceeds, that will be $25 per person. The proceeds go to the Marissa Tafaro Foundation to help seriously ill children in Middlesex County. So once again, both events open to the public. Want to invite everyone to share ideas and also raise money for a good cause. And Ed Camp is free. And there will be a breakfast buffet given by our company, Chartwells. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bader. In keeping with our past practice, we will open this portion of the meeting for statements from the public. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone, provide your name, your address for the record, and please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation 1100D.
David Pinkwitz, Island. First, I just wanted a quick comment for Mr. Harris. Thanks for mentioning the calendar going up on the website. I just would encourage, once it is there and people can review it, perhaps send out an alert to the parents so they'll know that, they don't have to be watching this broadcast to know that it's there. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about something, not anything specific for the board, more about a philosophy. Why are we here? I've been in the district now in terms of having children in the district this is my 12th year. I find there's a conflict that happens, You know, some of it's at the teacher level. Some of it's, I think, comes down maybe not on purpose, but from the district level. And this is the purpose of an education. The real purpose of an education, I think we probably would agree, is that you learn something, that you, whatever you're trying to learn, that you learn lessons from it. The purpose of the education is not, even though we see that as the outward label of it, the grades. We have to have them. Colleges expect them as a way to help measure the students that are applying. You know, we just, you know, so we're not, no, I'm not suggesting we get rid of grades. But there are times, I think, where the emphasis is too much on the measurement and not enough on how we learn and what we learn. So as an example, one of the ways that from the district side we emphasize it is through the use of a class rank. Class ranks obviously were very common for many years, but there are school districts that have eliminated them. And when you say, well, we still want to measure, maybe we want to know who the valedictorian is, want to know who the salutatorian is. And I'm not suggesting there won't be students who would miss having a rank. However, it has some negative effects too, because as you know, the students, especially the ones applying to colleges, are overly worried about their class rank. And we had a few years ago, I can't remember how many years ago, a woman, a parent, came before the board to ask about a drama class. Her student, her son or daughter, I can't remember which, was interested in drama, but it was an S-track class, at least at the time. I don't know if it still is. And their concern was, well, that will affect rank. Can you make drama an R-track class? But to me, like sitting in the audience, the real issue is if you like drama, if you want to learn or you know, be on stage, take drama. The class rank, while it, you know, it affects you somewhat, to me it's not the most important. The most important thing is to learn. Take the core curriculum, but also take things that interest you that might be outside the core curriculum. But I think class rank, just the measurement of it, leads to a lot of decisions, most of which we'll never learn of because of it. Then there is a focus on tests rather than the learning process. So I've seen this, and a lot of this is teacher specific, but I've had classes where teachers treated homework as you were just marked that you did it. And so most kids did very well in the homework, but the real measurement, the true measurement, was on quizzes and tests where you were actually checked to see what you knew. And I think that works well because when you try to measure too quickly, everyone learns at a different rate. And while there's a set amount of time to learn any particular topic, you shouldn't expect, I mean, we're going to class for a reason. The expectation should not be that day one, everyone knows and understands what they're learning. That's a process. The part of that process is in class. Part of that process might be discussion with a teacher, discussion with other students. Part of that process is sleep. And we could have a whole separate topic on sleep and what it means to high school students, a separate time. But you know that's all important. I think we emphasize too much and grade too much. How well did you do your homework? Which is, for kids to care, it's only encouraging them probably to copy answers more than to learn the topic if it's urgent. And I suggest, you know, it doesn't work out well. Block scheduling, we talked briefly about block scheduling in terms of AP, but our 4x4 block schedule kind of does the worst of all worlds. I talked about sleep. We have twice the learning per day over a traditional schedule, yet we only have that one night of sleep between days. If you compare it to an AB block, so if you want blocks but you go to an AB block, we have there, you have an extra day of learning. In between the time you first get introduced to a topic, you have an extra day to absorb it. And sleep does help people learn. And there's studies that prove this. I think, you know, our just a schedule that we have does not encourage learning. And, you know, so that pretty much, that's what I wanted to talk about. I think I would like to see more done to encourage more focus on the learning aspect and less focus on the measurement aspect. I realize the measurement will be there. I recognize it will be there, and we have to measure the children, you know, at some point. But I think, you know, right now the emphasis, I see too much going the wrong way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkowitz. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So motion.
Motion by Mr. Molnar, second.
Second?
Second by Ms. Anderson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.